Welcome to this explainer. Look, today we're doing something a little bit different. We are actively cutting through all those loud, daily, often sensationalized headlines to objectively understand the actual structural and economic drivers behind what is undoubtedly one of the most significant political phenomena in modern American history. Whether you love him or hate him, the enduring popularity of Donald Trump is undeniable. So in this explainer, we're going to rely purely on the data and the documented policies to really unpack the economic foundations of his support. Okay, let's dive right into this. You really have to ask yourself, why do millions of Americans maintain such fierce support despite years of immense political and legal controversy? It's a puzzle that literally captivates observers all over the world. And to find the answer, we really have to look right past the rhetoric and dig deeply into the economics, the structural frustrations, and the actual policies that built such a fiercely loyal base in the first place. So, here is our roadmap. We'll start with the outsider phenomenon, then move to the domestic economic appeal, check out America First trade policies, discuss the economics of border security, and finally, wrap up with the MAGA movement identity. Let's start with part one, the outsider phenomenon. To really get the economics, you first have to understand the messenger. Donald Trump, he didn't enter politics through the usual traditional channels. He arrived as a businessman and a television personality, leveraging an outsider status that just resonated instantly. Think about it for a second. Millions of people had grown so deeply frustrated with traditional politicians that the promise to drain the swamp wasn't just some catchy phrase. No, it was seen as a necessary wrecking ball to business as usual. He tapped into this massive appetite for an outsider who promised to prioritize the everyday citizen over entrenched political interests. Moving on to part two, the domestic economic appeal. Now, what's really interesting here is that right beneath the surface of all those cultural headlines was a very concrete, very tangible domestic agenda. We're talking about sweeping actions, things like the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, aggressive deregulation across the energy and financial sectors, and incredibly explicit promises to revive American manufacturing. For millions of voters, these were not abstract ideas at all. They were tangible economic shifts. This was the absolute bedrock of their support, a promised return to localized economic prosperity. Of course, any major economic policy is going to generate fierce debate, and it is totally vital that we look impartially at both sides. Supporters point directly to record low pre-pandemic unemployment rates as proof that businesses and workers were really thriving. They saw real-world job creation. Critics, however, argue that the benefits largely favored the top earners, quickly pointing out that federal deficits grew by trillions during this exact same period of growth. All right, section 3, America First trade policies. You hear this phrase a lot, but what does America First actually mean in practice? Well, it is a philosophy that insists on prioritizing the United States' own economy, its manufacturing sector, its energy independence, and its national interests way above international commitments. It represented a fundamental, huge pivot away from decades of globalist trade policies. And why does this matter to you? Because it fundamentally changed the cost of imported goods in your local stores, and it shifted the entire strategic direction of global manufacturing. And this wasn't just campaign talk. It resulted in concrete actions that literally reshaped global commerce. The administration implemented widespread tariffs on foreign steel and aluminum, replaced NAFTA with the USMCA, and very publicly debated NATO burden sharing, openly demanding allies step up their defense spending. This was the America First philosophy, actively, visibly reshaping international trade in long-standing alliances. And just like the domestic economy, the outcomes here are highly contested. If you ask supporters, these actions were long overdue. They see them as absolutely necessary to protect American national interests and domestic jobs from unfair foreign competition. Critics, on the flip side, see these policies as highly disruptive. They argue that it created unnecessary global trade tensions and severely strained relationships with historic allies. Next up, part 4, economics of border security. Now, immigration is undeniably one of Trump's defining issues, and it usually gets debated purely on cultural or legal grounds. But if you look a bit closer, the rationale is surprisingly economic. For many supporters, stronger border security isn't just about geography. It's seen as a vital mechanism for protecting domestic wages, preserving public resources, and ensuring national security. To the base, a secure border is, quite literally, a secure economy. The clash of perspectives here is especially sharp. The supporter view basically maintains that strict border policies are a pragmatic necessity for maintaining domestic jobs and public safety. Conversely, the critic view firmly argues that many of these policies were overly harsh, lacked empathy, and were deeply harmful to immigrants and asylum seekers. It absolutely remains one of the most polarizing policy debates in modern politics today. Which brings us to our final section, Part 5, the MAGA movement identity. Make America Great Again. It started as a simple campaign slogan, but wow, did it evolve into a comprehensive political movement. This identity is a powerful synthesis anchored by nationalism, the very economic concerns we've just discussed, border security, and traditional conservative values. It created this incredibly powerful, shared sense of identity among millions of supporters who felt previously ignored by the establishment. And it is fascinating how this identity gets reinforced by a deep distrust of traditional media. By using unscripted rallies and social media, Trump just completely bypasses traditional filters. Supporters view this as raw authenticity, and they generally believe mainstream media treats him unfairly. Critics and journalists see inflammatory rhetoric that demands fact-checking and real accountability. But here's the thing, this constant media battle doesn't weaken the base. It actually cements their loyalty. And this brilliantly illustrates the ultimate result of all that loyalty: sheer, undeniable political resilience. From the 2016 outsider campaign right through the intense economic focus of the pre-2020 years and straight into a post-2020 era filled with immense legal controversies, the support hasn't broken. Because the base genuinely believes he is fighting the establishment on their behalf, they often view legal challenges as unfair attacks, sustaining a resilience that is rarely seen in history. So, the really crucial takeaway here is this: not every supporter agrees with every single policy, every tariff, or every unscripted statement. But actually, scratch that. That's not the point. The point is, they are united by a shared desire for profound structural change, prioritizing domestic economic security, and maintaining a firm anti-establishment stance. He represents a challenge to a system they feel is fundamentally broken. Donald Trump remains a figure who represents profound change and strength to millions, while for sure representing stark division to others. But you simply cannot fully grasp the phenomenon without understanding the rock-solid economic foundation it's built upon. So I'm going to leave you with this to think about. As time moves forward and we look past the daily headlines to focus on these massive structural forces, how will history ultimately debate the true economic and political legacy of this movement? Thank you so much for exploring this with me today, and keep questioning the structures behind the stories,